Welcome into the Browns Report. I'm Matthew Peterson, and after the first game of the NFL preseason, the Cleveland Browns are 1-0, but we have some winners to go along with it, and unfortunately, life brings us some losers as well. And let's get started with the winners. First one up, and this one was coming a mile away. It's the rookie linebacker out of Notre Dame, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He was no joke. JOK was all over the gridiron. 8 tackles, a sack, 3 tackles for loss. The 21-year-old was just spectacular, moving up and down the field, brought down Gardner Minshew, and he was just a huge bright spot for this entire defense that basically limited the Browns to 6 points, excluding 1 garbage time touchdown. But JOK, he's no joke. Even though he missed the beginning of training camp and maybe there was some speculation about whether or not he would be ready for the first game of the season, Alex in the comments said it best. JOK is no joke. And here are some other comments coming from one of Jeremiah's teammates, Greg Newsom, a fellow rookie. Simply put, he's a stud. He's a beast. Glad we have him on our team for sure. And that's one of the best ringing endorsements you can give, because when you go up against someone in the NFL and you get to realize, thank God that I don't have to play him on Sunday and I just got to compete at half speed in practice, when the season rolls around, big time sigh of relief. So Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, by far the biggest winner coming out of this first preseason game, made a case to rise up to the top of the depth chart and maybe be a linebacker starter come week 1 of the regular season. But guys, how about you tell us? Heard enough of me talking. Let me know down in the comments. Is JOK the player to watch now? A lot of people were saying DPJ was the guy. He was the biggest headliner in the preseason and training camp for Cleveland. Is there a changing of the guard? Let me know down in the comments. But speaking of DPJ, he had a pretty great game too. He's right behind Jeremiah, but not as big, but still a huge winner. 3 receptions, 26 yards, but don't let those little feeble numbers fool you. In the preseason, it's not about the stats. You know, you only get to play so many snaps. Peoples-Jones did not go into the second half. So what are the big takeaways from him? How about some amazing big-time first down grabs? He showcased what everyone has been talking about. The Cleveland beat writers, everyone who has been following the training camp closely for the Browns has been just singing from the top that Donovan Peoples-Jones is a huge wide receiver to keep an eye on for, and you saw why. So guys, let me know, who was the biggest star of the game for the Browns and the Jaguars in week 1? If you think it was JOK, Donovan Peoples-Jones, someone else, whatever it may be or whoever it may be, pop down in the comments and let me know. Now let's keep the hype train going. Let's go on to the next winner, and that's Richard LeCounte III. That's right, the Georgia alum had an interception and a sack. First takeaway for the Browns, that award goes to RL III. And what a game it was for him. He's a roster bubble-ish guy. He's trying to make his case. He doesn't have room to mess around. And pretty good case to be made when you get an interception in your preseason debut. Moving on, it is now time to go back to the offense. Demetric Felton, another guy who was more of a bubble player, had to prove it in the preseason. Could not mess around, couldn't have bad snaps, wouldn't get by because of his name, and he lived up to it. Had a handful of receptions. He got involved in special teams, offense. He had some tackles, too, on defense after some turnovers, but he was getting busy, okay? That's what I'm getting at here. So he was flying all over the field. When you can make plays on special teams as a roster bubble guy, boy, oh boy, does that make coaches smile. Speaking of smiling, how about Davion Davis? The guy who they signed from the Minnesota Vikings after last season had the play of the game, honestly. Huge, Randy Moss-esque catch in the back of the end zone over the Jaguars DB, goes up, climbs the ladder, and brings it down. Finishes the day, 4 receptions for just over 50 yards. A touchdown to go with it on top. And Davion Davis, this is not a team you have a lot of room in that Cleveland Browns wide receiver room. Okay, they've already got OBJ, Jarvis Landry, DPJ, Rashard Higgins. There's not a ton of wiggle room. Anthony Schwartz, they keep coming to me. So Davion Davis, he's making his case of, you got to keep me. Speaking of keeping, do you love the Cleveland Browns? Do you want more Browns Report coming to you? go down and subscribe. The more subscriptions we get, the more Browns content we can give you. So when the Browns win, you win because you get more content. But in order for that to happen, go down and subscribe. Unfortunately, the training camp and the preseason process inevitably comes with some losers. These are people who will not be suiting up on the 53-man roster come September, and it's just part of life. It's sad, but here we are. So let's talk about some losers. And the first loser is just the entire DB room, specifically the safeties. And here's why. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he came into the Cleveland Browns training camp, a second-round draft pick, and he could play both positions. He could play linebacker and maybe a little bit of free safety, strong safety, some kind of hybrid, and bounce around a little bit. And so when he's playing as well as he is, what that's going to do is that's going to tell the Browns coaching staff and front office, hey, JOK, he can be a hybrid. He can do both, so we don't need an extra safety on the roster. We can use that roster spot that we saved for a fourth or fifth safety somewhere else. And so that's going to make things a little tighter. Necks are going to get a little smaller when JOK is playing that great. So you look at the Cleveland Browns depth chart here for the DBs. Look at those safeties especially. Ignore the top two, right? Harrison, Johnson, Delpit, LeCounte. He was someone that was a bit of a bubble guy. And he had a great game today. But I'm looking at the guys below him. Benton, Mofat. Those guys, they've got to really prove something because what JOK is doing is great for the Browns, but it's very quietly not good for them. Let's keep the loser train moving, and unfortunately, whenever you're injured, you're not available. And you know how the saying goes. The best ability is availability. And Mack Wilson left the game with a shoulder injury. Didn't look extremely serious. Didn't look like it was a season-ending kind of injury. But still, Mack Wilson was more, he had a foot in the water of making the 53-man camp, 53-man roster. But still, you got to be healthy. And so Wilson, who's kind of moved up and down the depth chart between the starters and the second-string guys, he can't mess around with injuries here. I don't think this is going to boot him off the roster by any means, but still, if you're not available, what are you doing for them? And we have more injuries to go through. This one's more of a bubble player than the last one. Steven Carlson, the current fourth-string tight end. I expect the Browns to take 4 tight ends, but it may not be Carlson after leaving with a knee injury. And remember, there's only 3 preseason games this year. We get a bonus regular season game, which means a little less time to prove who you are and get back from injury. So for Carlson, he's got to return to the practice field as soon as possible with that knee injury if he wants to make that 53-man roster.